at which we'll go on to our next, please.
Lawrence Russell. Are we beginning to backslide on Brexit?
There's been a new twist to this bitter saga, the prospect of the transition period being extended. Theresa May apparently coming up with a route that gets through the huge divisions in her cabinet, not to mention divisions with the UN, which would have Britain remaining inside the customs union effectively, while a workable, technical, practical solution was evolved for Northern Ireland that would retain the open border. Rachel Johnson, are we beginning to backslide on Brexit, is Lawrence Russell's question.
I was so guaranteeing that you were going to come to the man we only know as Jacob now in public life. To me, what I see happening is Brexit's like a family holiday. Half the members of the family didn't want to go at all. And now we've been stuck for, I think it's 694 days in a traffic jam with everyone arguing over the map. And Jacob the other day said that this notion that we should be in a backstop scenario whereby we remain aligned in terms of our customs with the EU so we can carry on trading for an almost indefinite time, and the horizon of actually leaving the EU recedes ever further into the distance, was completely cretinous. So with that in mind, I think that we have to be very, very focused and accept that the Lords, who've made 15 amendments to the EU withdrawal bill to date, maybe they have been obstructive and it's been a bit scattergun. But the one they made on the meaningful vote, I think, is very important, because so far the executive has not consulted either the people nor Parliament on the deal. Therefore, I think we're in a state where it looks like we could get the worst of all worlds or crash out without a deal. Very quickly, I'll finish. What this means is that the MPs should have a meaningful vote on the deal, which probably includes a third option, which is not just a vote on the deal or no deal, but a third option, which is to whether we should revert to the status quo ante the EU referendum, because then I think everybody gets a real chance to assess whether we're going to, as it were, take the country into a golden sunlit uplands or off the cliff.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, are we, for which I presume one might read Theresa May, beginning to backslide on Brexit?
Well, I think, Mr. Russell, you're right to be concerned. I'm certainly concerned that many things that we were told would not happen now seem to be happening. So, at the beginning of the process, there was going to be a great fight over the sequencing of the talks. We gave in on the sequencing of the talks. We were going to do a great deal to prevent us giving a large sum of money to the European Union. We're giving them £40 billion. There was going to be an implementation, not a transition period. There is now a transition period. We were going to be out of the European Court of Justice. We're in the European Court of Justice at least until the end of 2020. And now we're talking about extending the customs union 2.5 years before the deadline for us having a new system in place, which seems to me preparing for failure. That surely the government, Her Majesty's government, with all the resources at its command, can think up a system and implement it within 2.5 years, considering it's had a 2-year period beforehand to start doing some work. So yes, I think you're right to be concerned. I'm certainly concerned, and I will be looking very carefully at what comes out of the agreements in June and in October, because I think the British electorate will be just as concerned as I am if Brexit does not mean Brexit.
In the end, if Theresa May decides that there has to be a decision to remain inside the customs union to secure an open border with Northern Ireland, and that may have to go on for some time after the end of the transition period, what can you do about it? Apart you've just said how much you've lost.
Well,
what can you do about it? Anything?
I could point out that it would be against the manifesto commitments that were given by the Conservatives and therefore given on behalf of the Prime Minister. It would be against the things that she has said in her various speeches, including the Mansion House, the speech in Florence and the speech at Lancaster House. And I expect the Prime Minister to stick to her word. I trust the Prime Minister, and therefore I will anticipate that there will not be further backsliding.
Well, you say further backsliding. If the Prime Minister decides that there is a majority in the House of Commons against a no deal, is it not the case that you're very likely to lose some of your less passionate troops that support you?
Well, I think...
who will therefore go with the Prime Minister, both for the fear that if she falls, it would be a very bad thing, and secondly, to say, look, we'll support you if necessary if there is a confidence vote.
Oh, well, I will certainly support the Prime Minister in a confidence vote.
Come what may.
Under the Fixed Term Parliament Act, I will vote for the government in a confidence vote. Yes, of course I will.
Under any circumstances. This is very interesting. Whatever she says, you will vote for.
But this is very important because the Constitution has changed. The Fixed Term Parliament Act means that a specifically worded vote of confidence would lead to an election. This is not a guarantee that there will be every vote when I will always support the government. I don't think any MP should ever give that guarantee because we should always vote in the interests of the nation and of our constituents.
One more question before I move on. Do you accept that it will be impossible for Northern Ireland to have an open border except by remaining part of the single market, because otherwise there will have to be regulatory checks by the EU?
But regulatory checks are not the same as a hard border. There is already a border in Ireland between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. There's a border for immigration. There is a border for excise duty on fuel and on alcohol. There is a border for the currency. And there is a border for value-added tax.
But this is goods we're talking about.
That's right. We're talking about goods. These are not implemented at the border crossing. It is perfectly possible to say these are the regulations that you must apply on goods that are in the Republic of Ireland, in the EU, and these are the ones that must apply in Northern Ireland, in the United Kingdom, and to enforce those under the normal law without having checkpoints. The border does not need to be a checkpoint, even if it is a tax point, because it is already a tax point. And therefore, I think the problem that has been created, the idea that you've got to have a hard border, is essentially a bogus one being used by the EU to try and keep the UK in the single market, because we're not going to split Northern Ireland off. And that would be entirely alien to how our country operates. Northern Ireland is just as much part of the United Kingdom as Somerset is. So we will remain a united kingdom.
Okay.
And the EU wants to keep us in the structures of the European Union. Of course it does, and we should be robust.
I'll come back to you.